Uncertain times call for uncertain friends. Hello, I am Dan, and this is Uncertainly. So my last video introduced this new project called Uncertainly, but the thrust of this project is, I guess we can call it video correspondence. A top comment from last time said, Dan in 2020, quote, I basically want to become a Twitch streamer in mostly the just chatting category. And you know what, that is close. That's close to what I'm after, but I do think that the correspondence element here is going to make this a little bit different. Instead of a real-time conversation, I see this kind of like being pen pals, except obviously through video, which hopefully allows us all to be just a little bit more precise with what we're saying and what we mean, and allows us to, speak uninterrupted for like longer stretches. All to say, video responses are gonna be crucial here, which means this is the first real episode, because it's the first one where I'm gonna respond to video responses. I was curious as to how y'all are coping with the coronavirus pandemic, and today I'm going to respond to the first 4 video responses that landed in my inbox.
It's completely empty out there, and my phone's camera is being so weird. Oh, it's the M15. Hello. Hey Dan, I'm Nick. I live in New York. I've been watching your videos since I was about 9, 10. I'm a senior in college. Well, I guess I'm still a senior in college. I don't know. I'm off to get some supplies right now and to do my daily exercise, solitary exercise that they're saying we should be doing. Keeping away from people, obviously. Just hanging out. Figured I'd show you around. Lower East Side is completely empty. Normally it's full of people at all times, especially on a beautiful Saturday morning like this one. So what we do, we're adapting, we're hanging out. We've got some cats right here. Figured if I'm off to get supplies anyways, I would walk you over to the East River. We can look at some nice views. I was supposed to be presenting my big thesis at the end of the year, where I've been working on it for a year, doing a lot of coding, doing a lot of data engineering, but that probably isn't happening anymore. Kind of bummed about that. It was a lot of hard work. But if you have any ideas of how to turn it into a cool YouTube video, maybe I'll do that instead. It's about fare evasion arrests in New York City. People getting arrested for jumping the turnstile in the subways. I was studying how police treat different groups of people differently in that context, if you get my meaning. Everyone's had really good days where they're feeling great, and they're feeling like, we'll weather this out, we'll be fine. And everyone's having really, really shitty days where we're just everyone's anxious and depressed and, really sad about all the things that they were really excited for that are just not happening anymore. I probably won't graduate normally. Probably won't have the commencement and that kind of thing. I feel really bad and just appreciative also of all the small business workers that we have. I was at the grocery store the other day, and people are working overtime, stocking the shelves despite the risk that is posed to them now. UPS drivers and other delivery drivers, food delivery drivers in general, actually. What was your favorite part of New York? I remember you used to live here. I remember where you lived. Was it Brooklyn? I've always wanted to do a vlog in New York. Finally, now's the time. And I present to you the beautiful East River Park. One of my favorite parts of the city, honestly. On this bench it says, too late to kill trees. We need each and every one. Very true. Testing. Coronavirus testing. It's so important. It's important for the fear that we all feel about this thing. And it's important for science, for us to learn how it's affecting people. And, most states don't have enough tests right now. But the states that do have enough tests, such as New York, who have more tests per capita right now than China or South Korea, according to the governor yesterday, that means that New York's also showing a bunch more cases because people are just looking at the number. And as a data scientist, what I do as my job outside of college, I think it's important to have data that's not super misleading. And so I've created a website that I'll send you. It's an interactive map that I'm updating every single day with the latest available data that not only gives you the number of positive tests in each state, but that's coloring the states by the proportion of positive tests that they're finding, because that is also a very important metric. And it also kind of shows us states that are only testing positive people. And I would love for you to check that out, because I think it'll help us understand all these numbers that we're seeing in a way that is better, and maybe in a way that's a little bit less scary. The last thing, Dan, is that you were the first YouTuber that I got into back in the day. You were the person who introduced me to the idea of YouTube as like this place of community. You're the person who introduced me to the Vlog Brothers. You're the person who introduced me to all of these kind of creators before all those big changes that happened to YouTube. And I would like to thank you for that. I would like to thank you for that kind of influence, for you know, that inspiration you provided, like little 10-year-old me watching your videos while you were in high school, you know? Really, really meaningful to me. And I'm very happy. I was ecstatic this morning when I saw that you had published another video and you're trying to get back into YouTube. Yeah, you know, hang in there, have a good one. Let's look at the river again. It's so beautiful. Can you even see it? Yeah, that's Brooklyn right there.
Nick, I wish that you could have seen my organic facial expression the first time that I watched through your video response and you got to the part where you were talking about how 10-year-old you used to watch my videos back in the day, and it introduced the idea of YouTube as a place for community for you. It's so sweet and so special, and this just now random seeming thing that just floats into my life occasionally, but never fails to just make my day. I'm gonna put a link in the description to the website that you put together, the interactive map showing the proportion of positive COVID-19 test results in each US state. It's a super cool data visualization, although I am kind of curious, like, what are we supposed to make of it? I look at that map and I see, for example, that Ohio is bright red. What does that mean? What's the situation like on the ground in Ohio as it relates to your map? As for East River Park, I am quite familiar. Almost exactly 7 years ago, one fine Saturday morning, I ingested some friendly fungi and took a trip to East River Park. Is very memorable. And yeah, I lived in New York City for 5 years. I moved there in 2011 and I first landed in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. Then I moved to Williamsburg. Then I moved to Flushing in Queens, and finally to Woodside in Queens before I moved here to Pittsburgh. As for my favorite place in New York City, I mean, it's easy to say Prospect Park just because, you know, green space is at a premium in the city and it's less crowded than Central Park, so you can kind of get away from people a little bit. But you know, maybe my more obscure favorite place would be the New World Mall food court in Flushing, Queens, way off on the last 7 train stop. Flushing, Queens is home to one of the world's largest and fastest growing ethnic Chinese communities outside of China, obviously. And the New World Mall food court has so much delicious, incredible, cheap Southeast Asian cuisine. There's tons of other stuff to explore in the area. Once things settle back down to normal, assuming that they ever do, it's definitely worth the day trip. You mentioned being appreciative of grocery workers and delivery drivers, and it's funny you should mention delivery drivers because before this pandemic, I was supporting myself, keeping a roof over my head by driving for Uber and Lyft. But about a week and a half ago, I stopped being comfortable sharing a confined space with, 20 or so traveling strangers each and every day. It just seemed like a bad idea. I have since switched to delivering meals through Uber Eats and Postmates and DoorDash. And I don't love setting foot in so many restaurants every day, touching so many door handles, doorknobs, but I do have a little routine with a work glove that helps minimize my contact with frequently touched surfaces. All right, so hopefully you could see all this. This is the jacket that I wear, and I got a work glove right here, so when I'm about to open a door, I kind of slide it out, hold it like this, and slip it on my hand, open the door, and then I put it back in the pocket like this. And then I push down from the outside and pull it off. And I sanitize that glove every single night. I only switched to food delivery because I need to pay my bills, but people are really appreciative. Yesterday, I was delivering food to some door, and someone, it wasn't even the person I was delivering food to, they just stopped me on the street from 6 feet away and said, "Thank you so much for what you do." I mean, okay, I'm taking on a little bit of risk and helping people maintain some semblance of normalcy, filling a small social need in these trying times. And you should always tip your delivery driver, pandemic or not, because the base pay on these apps is garbage and barely covers the cost of gas. But at the same time, I am no hospital worker, all right? Like, grocery store workers are an order of magnitude more heroic than delivery drivers, and hospital workers are an order of magnitude more heroic than that. Like, yeah, it feels good to bring people their dinners, but hospital workers are risking their lives. Many will lose their lives, and when this is all said and done, they deserve a pay raise. We should make a national holiday in their honor and give them all a collective medal of freedom. And finally, your senior thesis about fare evasion and disparities in enforcement sounds really interesting. I mean, if you want to put it on YouTube, maybe some kind of a slideshow with a voiceover, I'd definitely watch it. I don't know if you have to like defend your thesis to graduate or something, but that might be good practice for just knowing how to orate your points. And yeah, it extra sucks that you won't be able to have a traditional graduation, but you know, at the same time, lots of plans are being canceled, and you know, we're adaptable creatures as human beings. The transition is going to be difficult for a while, but we'll be able to reestablish some sort of socially distant baseline that we'll get more or less used to for as long as, you know, we need to be used to it to ride this out. And an example from my life is that next weekend I was planning on going to a wedding. Obviously, that's not happening anymore. Well, so actually, my friends are still getting married next week, but to watch the like official marriage ceremony, we're all going to have to call in via Zoom. Strange times. And they're still going to throw a whole big shindig, you know, later, as soon as they can.
Hey Dan, I'm Dono, and thanks for asking. I've been doing pretty good so far. It's getting a bit lonely. I've been locked up in my apartment all week, and one thing I've noticed is when you sit in the same chair all day every day without looking at anything else than your desktop environment, you get really bored. So I'm gonna start eating in my kitchen and reading in my bed and watching TV instead of watching stuff on my computer, just so I don't sit in the same chair all day. I'm probably gonna like move my bed around and my furniture around just so I create different looking environments. It's silly, but I think it's gonna have a psychological impact. Keep the curtains open. That's one thing I really need to do more. I just opened them to make this video and I realized, wow, like sunlight is really uplifting. That and going on walks. Like, sure, you shouldn't be meeting people or going places, but taking a walk outside the block, just looking at the sunlight, it's going to make a difference. I hope you've been doing fine, and I think this YouTube socializing experiment you're doing is a good excuse as any to be coming back to YouTube. I'll be curious to see where this goes. Talk to you later.
Domino, thank you so much for your response, and I'm very glad I inspired you to open your blinds. You know, in my life, I'm not suffering for a lack of sunlight since I'm driving around town most days delivering meals, but you know, I'm still socially isolated, if not, you know, sunlight and fresh air isolated. And yes, walks are so important right now. I have the greatest and best dog in the whole world. Her name is Roswell, and we've been going for many a goodly long walk through this whole thing. You know, one of my mantras over the last week and a half of coronavirus has been, well, at least it's springtime. Because I don't know where I would be if it was still gray and freezing every day in Pittsburgh, not nearly as good of a mental place. Although this dog that I love so much is dealing with a sprained tail right now, and I feel awful because it's a little bit my fault. I was in a hurry to get out the door yesterday and start delivering meals before the lunch rush, and so I took her for a walk even though it was a little cold and a little bit rainy, and she's a short-haired breed, and I guess she got a little chilly, and that can lead to a tail sprain. According to the internet, she'll heal up to 100% in a couple of days with some rest, but I feel awful. She was in a lot of pain last night, and she let me know. She was letting out these long, sad whimpers. She couldn't find a comfortable position to sleep in. Like, neither of us slept very well. She's already got a little more pep in her step and showing signs of clear improvement, but one reason that she's not a visual aid right here for you right now is because I just want to give her some space to rest. She's probably right on the other side of my door right there, though. It's just an example from my life of how, more normal life stressors are still continuing unabated, just with this kind of 3x happening during pandemic multiplier. Anyway, though, Domino, I think that rearranging your furniture and being conscious of using like every little corner of your living space is brilliant, and I'm very glad to be able to pass that idea from you along to everyone else watching. We're only just at the beginning of this strange and sad season, and taking the time right now to organize and declutter and clean could go a long way towards maintaining folks' mental health and just general comfort through this period of social distancing.
Hey Dan, glad to hear you're doing well. It's nice to see you uploading a video again, and good to know that you're taking care of your mental health, because I think that's something that people really need to learn to prioritize, and I think if more people did prioritize it, the world would be a lot better place. So really, my day-to-day life hasn't changed too much. I'm pretty lucky. I am working from home right now. My temp job basically moved the entire office. So I have like my work computer, and I hook it up to my TV, and I have like a little workstation in my studio apartment in Washington, D.C. So it gets a little crazy. Like, I get a little cabin fever because like I'm just sitting in front of a computer all day long. But I am like talking to friends and family, video chatting with a lot of people. My ex-girlfriend moved out like a few days ago, and so I'm not used to being by myself. I'm used to having someone like to talk to. So it can get a little lonely at times. I'm more of one of those extroverted people. Like, the way I cope with a lot of things is I go outside and I do stuff, and I can't really do that right now, which is unfortunate. You mentioned, like, what does the scene look like where I live? Like, in DC, ironically, it's not as bad as a lot of other parts of the country yet, knock on wood. I went to the grocery store last week, and the only things they were out of were toilet paper, paper towels, and, of all things, frozen vegetables. So I'm not eating super healthily right now. I don't really want to go home. I want to avoid travel. I'm originally from Florida. I do not want to fly. I do not want to drive because I don't have a car, so I'd have to rent one. But like, just from all the news stories in my family that I've talked to that live there, like, the grocery stores are pandemonium down there. Like, there's no food. People are panicking. The population is a lot older, so they're at higher risk. So I really don't want to go down there. I know my mom is taking care of my grandparents. I go to a therapist every week. I've been going to one since I was in high school. I think it's, like I said, something that people need to prioritize more. But yeah, so I don't think I'm going to go in person for my next appointment. I'm going to try and send an email on Monday and like set up a virtual appointment. This like virus has really made mental health like on the forefront for a lot of people, because when you peel back from all of the day-to-day distractions of work, of going on vacation, of doing all these things, and you're in self-isolation, you have a lot more time with your own thoughts. People are realizing that like they might not be prioritizing the right things. I hope that after this virus is passed, we kind of have a long, hard look at like what society prioritizes. We move people towards teleworking that can telework, because if you have, let's just say your company employs 10,000 people, and that means that you need, I don't know, 100,000 square feet of space for all of your employees. Well, if 40% of them can work from home, that means you can downsize your workspace size by hopefully like 30 or 35% because you still might need them to come in for meetings every now and again or something. But when those buildings are converted then to apartment homes, that helps bring down the cost of living, because that means there's more supply on the market. I know for me, like with the family history of like at least, especially on my mom's side, anxiety, I've had to do a really like just keep my mom at arm's length because she's constantly texting me, which makes me more anxious. There's a really good video on YouTube by the YouTuber Theramintrees. It was about infantilization. He's like a counselor in the UK, and infantilization can take many forms, but one of the forms is basically parents don't treat their adult children like adults. And my mom doesn't do that all the time, but it's just during certain times, especially around stress, she reverts to her motherly form. And I know a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's just like they're always going to be your mother. Well, not really. Like they need to respect boundaries, and they need to like trust that their adult kids are going to know how to take care of themselves. I'm really glad that you reached out. I'm glad that you're doing well. Hopefully I can hear from you soon, and after all this blows over, if you're ever in DC, we can grab a beer or something. Stay safe with the coronavirus. Hope things are going well with you, and hope to hear back from you soon.
Frank, yes, assuming that this ever does blow over, let's definitely grab a beer in DC sometime. Sorry to hear that your mom is being overbearing through this. That's got to be a complicated tangle of emotions, like, I mean, always, but especially with our ×3 happening during a pandemic multiplier, right? I don't have a ton of personal experience to draw on here, but if nothing else, I see you, my friend, and you should not be gaslit into feeling any amount of shame for enforcing boundaries that you need. I really appreciate your introducing some policy ideas to this conversation. I mean, everyone's still just drinking from a fire hose trying to cope with this crisis, but there's no denying this crisis pulls into sharp relief many absurdities of how we've been living through late-stage capitalism. I hadn't really thought about the connection between having more office space than necessary and less housing space than necessary, but that makes a ton of sense. Like, this is the time. Let's dramatically cut back on our carbon emissions by eliminating unnecessary work commutes. Let's, yes, convert office space into affordable housing. Let's guarantee that everybody has free access to high-speed broadband internet in their homes. Let's take whatever basic income we wind up getting for the duration of this and make it permanent. Let's use this moment to organize and unionize as workers. Let's get Medicare to every damn buddy, and let's make sure that mental health care is included. And anything else that I might have missed, please leave a comment. I'm glad that you're already in the habit of taking care of your mental health, Frank, and I hope that you figured out some sort of virtual appointment with your therapist. I've been seeing a therapist since last July, and we just had our first phone session last week. It's obviously not quite the same as meeting in person, but c'est la vie aujourd'hui. A lot of what we talk about is obviously personal, but one bit of advice that my therapist shared with me that I think might be useful for more people out there is, we should allow ourselves in these difficult times to escape here and there by rediscovering things that we once loved and have maybe fallen out of over the last few years. For example, right now is a great time to rewatch Breaking Bad from the beginning, or to reread the Harry Potter books, or to play through a Pokemon game from the beginning. Things that are familiar, escapist, and easy. It's one thing to process this coronavirus with our active minds by reading the news, watching the news, talking it out here, but you also need to give your subconscious mind the space to process this as well. Treat yourself. Obviously, I am YouTubing again, which is maybe not so good for my subconscious mind, but it is a long lost love, But let's see, I'm playing chess again for the first time in years. I have downloaded every season of the greatest cartoon of all time, King of the Hill. Holy crap, Frank, your ex just moved out? That's too much, man. Like, I know from experience how hard it can be to be alone after you've grown accustomed to having a partner who's always there. Like, to now be extra super alone pandemic edition. You have my number, actually, Frank does. If you ever need to just slam that call button, do not hesitate. I am here. I might be in the middle of a delivery. I might have to call you back, but like, I will call you back.
Hey Dan, so I've been watching your videos for a long time. I mean, your Rubik's Cube tutorial is probably the first video I ever watched on YouTube, and it's definitely the first I ever remember watching on YouTube. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm glad you're uploading again. I'm a college freshman, so I've been living in a dorm for the past 6 months, meeting new people, trying to make friends, and it's been very convenient having everyone, like, especially friends that are on your floor, just being able to walk across the hall to hang out with people on a Friday night. But a couple weeks ago, or I guess a week, like and a half ago, we got an email from the president of our university saying that we all had to immediately go home and take online finals, and our spring break was extended by a week. And that was great news, like, hey, longer spring break, get to take online finals, it's less stressful, get to take them in your room, not have to go to some building, and so a lot of people went home that Sunday. However, on Monday, after maybe 90% of the university had gotten home, we got another email from our president saying that everyone had to immediately move out. So now everyone has to come back, get everything, not just the stuff they were keeping for spring break, but everything, and completely move out. Like, we are no longer living at that address. Showering in a public shower sucks, and never having your own personal space sucks, but it's nice to look back on and see that, like, I could just walk across the hall to a friend's dorm. Like, that closeness, the proximity that we all have is just over. So now the good. Throughout the last few months, I have felt as though I've kind of lost my identity, my personality, questioning who I am, why I'm relevant, am I an NPC? Basically figuring out what I bring to relationships. And that has kind of been a very deep struggle for me since around December. And that question never existed before I started college. And as soon as I got home, that anxiety kind of went away. So I think it's good that I'm gonna have these next 6 months to reflect on that and find who I am again, and come back next fall like regenerated, I guess. So thank you for asking, and I guess some questions I have for you and for your, like, our community, I guess. How, like, if anyone else has kind of struggled with that, and how they've dealt with it, if you've experienced kind of a loss of identity, and if you feel like you've really changed, or you found who you were before and brought that to your new life. So yeah, thank you.
You know, Ben, it is totally normal to be dealing with intense questions about your identity at this stage of your life. Like, it happens in different shades for everybody, but the most operative words there are, it happens for everybody. So here's the bad news. A fully formed and confident sense of identity can't just be theorized and constructed. It's not gonna come to you as some aha moment that you can just carry back to school with you in the fall, assuming that any of us are back to much of anything by the time fall rolls around, especially over the next decade of your life. New responsibilities, new jobs, new cities, new apartments, new neighborhoods, new relationships are just gonna keep coming at you, and each is going to exert some kind of a disruptive force on your sense of self. But don't panic, there's also good news. You know, all of that means that your job right now is actually a lot easier than the weight it seems you might be trying to carry. You don't need to prepare for some once and for all declaration of who you are for all eternity, okay? Just be wherever you are right now, and as you learn more about yourself, make changes one at a time that each help you to love yourself more and more. And what's this NPC talk? You're not a non-playable character. You are the main character. You are the protagonist. Okay, all right. In fairness, maybe you are just grinding XP somewhere right now, and maybe you're not sure quite where the story is going, but that's okay. I mean, I promise all these experience points are going to be worth it in the end. I'm really glad that since returning home, your anxiety has largely subsided, and you're probably right that this time to rest will be very healthy for you. But when this pandemic has subsided, when you return to school, please remember that if you find yourself feeling some variation of these same feelings, that is not a personal failure, okay? Keep grinding because you're getting stronger even when you feel weak. Also, pretty wild how your school just sent everybody home only to have them come back and get all their stuff and go home again. They could have done that better. So there you have it, the first real episode of Uncertainly. I hope you got something out of it, and if you did, I hope you'll go out of your way to tell a couple friends about this weird old YouTube man who used to be this weird young YouTube boy who you watched back in the day when you were a wee lad, to tell him he's back, and at the beginning of this very strange and scary chapter for our planet Earth, his new content was weirdly meaningful to you, and maybe they should check it out too. You watch this whole thing, so how much time would it take compared to Of course, click like, click subscribe, and leave a comment below letting me know your favorite podcasts. I am actively looking for more podcasts to listen to while I'm out and about delivering meals. And most importantly, please upload a video response and email a link to me, danbrownuniverse@gmail.com. It can be about anything that stood out to you from this video, or just more generally explaining how you're holding up amidst the beginning of this coronavirus pandemic. Yeah, it doesn't have to be fancy. You just talk to a camera. Your phone camera will do, as long as audio quality matters a little bit. Video quality, I do not care at all. You can film it on a potato. But yeah, send it to me, and that will help me continue making these. Thanks.
You're a good dog. You're a good dog. She's a good dog.